Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Justice is what everyone seeks when they or someone else has been wronged. Today's guest has experienced violence and is now an advocate against it. She says that she has a call going out from her heart to the heart of every woman. She says, be afraid, be someone else, show up, and woman up. Today, I'm joined by Anu George Canjanathoppil, CEO of International Justice Mission Canada. International Justice Mission is a global organization that protects people in poverty from violence. Anu, thank you so much for being here today. Can you just share a bit about your personal journey from experiencing violence to becoming an advocate against it?
Absolutely. I was barely 23 when it first happened, and still 23 when it happened again. And this time by absolute strangers, people I had no knowledge of. But what was powerful for me at that point was staring at impunity straight on, to know that you could have all the education in the world, but if you came in the way of challenging injustice, and if the perpetrator had the benefit of the public justice system serving him versus the victim, then odds are stacked against you. When I say all odds, all odds. And for me, at that point, I felt when violence glares at us with unrelenting intensity, I asked myself this: what is the cost of my silence going to be? What price do I pay for the comfort of conformity? Can I succumb to the seduction of approval or the paralysis of rejection? Or do I confront the very same violence with unwavering boldness, unyielding resolve, and uncompromising determination?
So, what are some of the pivotal moments or experiences that inspired you to take action against violence?
I think I started challenging injustice and violence when I was rather young, probably 6 or 7, when I started seeing that things were very different outside of my household. My family was a safe place. My parents were absolute delight to, be a part of the family with. But that is not the reality of people outside of my house. And it made me very uncomfortable that some had to live life in a different way than I did, and that some were never going to feel safe. That inequality of the situation bothered me. And that inequality also led to me challenging the status quo of people within my community. Like basic things like access to water was a problem, access to a system where you can dispose the garbage was a problem. So 13 years was when I decided to take that up against the local justice system and ensured that we had water brought to our community and that the power dynamics would not come in the way of us getting access to the very basic benefits. And that's when I discovered that law is powerful and our voice, however young you might be, whatever your gender might be, if it's a voice of reason, there is no option but to be heard. That is my start, I think.
I love it. I love your start, and you were so young. So, reflecting on your own experiences, what do you believe are some of the most significant barriers or challenges survivors of violence encounter when trying to advocate for change?
There are many answers to that question. It's a combination of stigma and shame associated with their experiences, then lack of support systems, whether it's emotional or practical, then fear of retaliation from abusers. I see that all the time. And failed systems, that really breaks it for the survivor. Then in developing countries, there are the legal and the bureaucratic hurdles, and financial constraints limiting advocacy efforts, then the trauma, PTSD, and then not knowing law, and or having the way to engage the media, public apathy, then intersectional discrimination, gender, everything. But for me, I think the biggest challenge was myself, referencing the person before paralysis, before the attack, to who I was at that point, and I thought I wasn't enough. So I think for a survivor, giving that environment, it's not just inviting them to the table, but letting them know that they own the table is really important for those who are partnering with them.
You've got so many incredible words of wisdom, and I know that there are a lot of victims out there that don't have the courage to speak, that don't have the courage to go ahead and think that being silenced will be okay for now. When we come back from the commercial break, I want to talk to you about, how you found the courage and the strength to speak out against violence, because it is not easy. So please don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's episode, the message is the time is now. Anu, how did you find the courage and the strength to speak out against violence, especially considering the potential risks involved?
I mean, the worst had happened already. I was paralyzed. I took a year to recover. But the truth is, I truly do not know of another way to live. Could I just stare at injustice like that and be quiet? I was haunted by the silence, the inertia in the face of violence that prevails the world. I mean, I was haunted by the neutrality. I was haunted by the apathy that allowed injustice to flourish unchallenged. Because, truth be told, inaction in the face of injustice is a form of complicity, isn't it? It's a betrayal of our shared humanity, a failure to stand up for what is right. And to me, there is absolutely nothing more damning than indifference in the presence of injustice. And that pushed me to action. Like there was no way I was going to sit and watch this happen to others around me.
So, it's difficult to carry on with this conversation because you've been through so much. But I know that you're going to inspire so many individuals out there. Can you describe some of the key strategies or initiatives that you've been involved in to combat violence in your community or even beyond?
Yeah, one of the most significant impact I would think was part of my contribution was to determine the benefit of partnership in tackling this violence because this is a multi-billion-dollar business. Human trafficking benefits many, and there is less than $300 million to solve this problem. There is no way even the world's largest anti-human trafficking organization like International Justice Mission can get to this on our own. So we needed partnership because the bad guys were partnering with each other. They were so really, they still are the most resourced, the most networked. They know how to band together when a problem comes. But I realized the same response was not coming from the community that needs to be responding to this. So I harnessed on the power of partnership almost a decade ago, actually, more than that, since 2011 is when I had the ability to launch the Google Intervention Program. And in partnership with grassroots organizations, what I discovered was that my 1 hour was translated into hundreds and then thousands of hours, meaning we had the ability to rescue tens of thousands of people month after month, year after year, therefore enabling the organization to move from rescue thousands, protect millions to almost rescuing 500 million by 2030 and beyond, and rescuing and protecting 500 million by 2030 and beyond. So I think that initiative, that strategy really pivoted the organization in a spectacular manner. And that way we were able to influence others into embracing and encouraging partnership as a way to tackle this crime. Yeah.
You and I were talking just before we started taping the show about, the amount of individuals that, during COVID lockdown were locked in with their abusers with no place to go. They didn't have their own money, they couldn't go to work. Work was their safe place, and they couldn't even
Yeah.
go to work to do that. And that exacerbated the entire problem, not only for human trafficking, as you were saying, but also for scammers as well. People were being hurt big time during this.
Absolutely. The pandemic destroyed the very fabric of our society. When we were safe behind locked doors, people were absolutely taking advantage of the safety that the locked doors offered. And we were the rise of online sexual exploitation of children in Philippines just in 2022. We discovered that 1 out of every 100 child was exploited. And the youngest child that we rescued from that situation was 2 months old. And this And
Oh,
year after year, this was just 2022. We are talking about 500,000 children every single year, a very conservative estimate. And Canadians are one of the topmost demand side offenders in the list. We rank an embarrassing fourth globally in perpetuating this crime in Philippines. So that's just the tip of the iceberg if we talk about the kind of crimes that, the kind of violence that increased in the pandemic season.
no amount of money can save all these people. Time and energy. I mean, you need to be able to just immerse yourself to help as many people as you can, but not everybody can be saved. Please don't go away. We'll be right back with more of injustice and violence and how to help yourself. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. On today's episode, the message is the time is now. Anu, I read this article and you were asked, what advice do you have for the women in our audience who want to make a difference in the world? And you gave 4 important points. You said, be afraid, be someone else, show up, woman up. What did you mean by that?
Well, it was basically to get people's attention, but we need to be afraid of what is going on outside of our world. Sometimes we tend to think, oh, it's not happening here, it's happening in somebody else's backyard, some other country. No, it is happening here. And a great example I have of that is children who are exploited outside of Canada. The perpetrators who are residing in Canada are posing a ton of danger to our children. If it's one out of every 100 child who's been perpetrated, the crime is perpetrated by a criminal here, that guy is in our backyard, possibly in our basement, using free internet to exploit children and coming for our kids. So be afraid. And then what was the other thing that I said? Woman up. I mean, there is always a tendency to kind of say, man up, that's the best thing to do. No, truly, what the world needs is a lot more of our essence, the mother that resides in each one of us, who cares deeply about what goes on. We don't discriminate. We don't discriminate children, whether it's ours or somebody else's. Our motherhood shows up to fight against injustice. And then being someone else, we tend to we all have this imposter syndrome. Well, I'm not good enough. I'm not,
Yeah.
I don't have what it takes to, respond to this crime. So I've encouraged women to decide to put on a mask if need be and fight that imposter who's residing in us, kick that person out. And even if you believe the imposter who's there is you, be someone else for someone who needs you to show up. I think that's basically what I was trying to mean when I challenged the women in the audience that day.
And I love it. And I love the fact that you talked about the imposter syndrome, because I don't care how successful you are. We all go through some sort of an imposter syndrome on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever it is. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because we all struggle with that.
Totally. Totally.
So in your opinion, what role do you think storytelling plays in raising awareness about violence and inspiring others to take action? Because clearly we all need to step in and help.
Yeah. That's actually a hard one to respond to because storytelling is important, but it should not be the sole reason why you choose to stand up against this injustice. Because I spent more than a decade and a half in the field, and we were so busy in the trenches leading rescues that it was so hard to even come up for air. And I used to wonder at that point, if only they knew. And I used to wonder if it was not enough to know that there exists this crime and there are 15 million people who are trapped in slavery and we needed to end it. I did not have the luxury of sharing those 10,000 stories of these 10,000 rescues that I was a custodian of. So it felt like reliving the trauma all over again. Sometimes I wished fundraising was not that hard and people would support the organization for the character and the integrity versus the charisma of the story or the teller. But yeah, it's important. It's absolutely important. If not for my stories, I wouldn't be here. It is important, but that shouldn't be the only reason why we decide to show up and step up for those who are grappling in violence.
So have you encountered any resistance or pushback in your advocacy efforts? Because I know there's always naysayers. And if so,
Yeah.
how have you navigated these challenges?
Well, yeah, that's always, but that's the nature of the beast. I mean, whichever part of the world I've had to lead advocacy initiatives, I've seen that there is definitely that first person in the room who's like, "Oh no, human trafficking is not a problem. What will we do without these slaves? Who's gonna, produce all these goods for us?" But there are also other people who are genuinely concerned as to how it impacts the economy. So these conversations are important, and as an organization, we have been so open to having these challenges so that we can give a clear articulation of why this advocacy initiative is crucial. And we have seen tremendous success. We have seen governments eat their words in less than 6 months after declaring that this was not a problem and come back and invest in these countries and say, no, slavery is an issue. We're going to tackle it. It's a priority for the government. And I think the way that we tackle this, I tackle this by being relentless, by not taking no for an answer, and just going back and being a pain in the brain and knocking those doors.
I like that. I like that. I like how feisty you are and just how determined you are. We need more people like you in the world. So when we come back, we're going to talk to you about what advice you would give to individuals who've experienced violence. So please don't go away. We will be right
Sure.
back. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's episode, the message is the time is now. And I'm joined by Anu George Canjanathoppil, CEO of International Justice Mission Canada. So, Anu, what advice would you give to individuals who have experienced violence and want to become advocates for change, but may feel overwhelmed, unsure, afraid, even don't even know where to start?
One, the knowledge that you're not going to be alone. The next thing I would say is very important. Start with today. Start with the now. The first step, and then allow that to lead to the next step. Stop for breath here and there, but never stop advocating for yourself or the mission. It should always be a pause or a comma, never a full stop.
So, how do you maintain for you resilience and self care while engaging in advocacy work that can be emotionally demanding for you?
By showing up, and I think that's the best way to sum up, by showing up for myself but also showing up for the mission. I'm not wholly successful, but then I'm determined not to give up on myself and the mission at the same time. The balance is not always a balance, but I appreciate the nuances in that space.
So, Anu, looking ahead, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of your advocacy work and basically the broader movement against violence?
My hope is summed up in the word, it is possible. We have seen transformation happen in every single country that we have been working in for the last 2 decades. So we have literally the vaccination against this problem. What we need to do is to bring people together to say yes to joining hands and saying no to violence. And we are getting there. I'm seeing this happen. I've been seeing this for 2 decades, and we are not too far from the end of this.
So, I want to look at international justice missions. How is their solution so unique?
Because we partner with the public justice system. The public justice, it's identifying where the crime exists, rescuing, rehabilitating, ensuring that the perpetrator is held accountable by putting them behind bars, but also repairing the public justice system. So we are basically hired to work ourselves out of our job. The kind of joy that we get every single time that we leave a country after doing the work that we have done and looking at the statistics of how much the prevalence is reduced, I mean, that is really what keeps us going. So I'm really excited to be out of a job in 2030. Might be, I might have to find something fun to do once this is done.
Yeah. So, tell me, how can we get involved in the solution?
Like I said, this is a multi-million dollar problem. There are people who are benefiting from this, and the resources to meet this problem is very limited. And we are the world's largest anti human trafficking organization. And we have seen how our theory of change works. It actually works. We have seen the reduction of crime close to 80% even in certain countries. So partner with organizations like us because we are partnering with other organizations. Go to www.igm.ca, find out how you can walk alongside this organization and find me on social media. Hit me a message and I'll be so happy to walk with you as you discover the ways to find the solution.
So we've got less than a minute left, and I want to ask you, I mean, this is a very dark space. You and I talked about it. It's a very difficult space to navigate. What keeps you in this fight, and what just keeps you going on a regular basis?
See, I'm a mother to two daughters. I started this fight even before I became a mom. But I think my pursuit for justice intensified after my daughters were born. I think that is the desire that we have for our children, and we have an opportunity to step up. And once you've seen the face of a survivor, especially those who have fought against all odds and have become lawyers and people in different, even politics, and taking the lead, it will transform our ability to understand humanity and human even better. So that keeps me going. That is my single
Thank,
most motivating factor.
thank you so much, Anu.
Thank you.
Anu was interviewed in 2023, and I thought that this quote would come full circle with today's episode. And Anu said, I used to be an athlete, a pretty fast one at that. For athletes like us, time is everything. Every second matters. But you know when I ran the fastest? When I had my perpetrators at my heels. As a survivor of violence, let me tell you, for every single person who's waiting for help, who's waiting for someone to show up, the time is now. For the mom or dad who's waiting for their child to return, the time is now. For us to respond, the time is now. Thank you for watching. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Bye for now.